Now, some of the comments, read the question. It sounds so basic, but it is really important. So, the key words in the question, do you need to give your answer to 3 significant figures? In Extension 1, you don't normally lose marks if you don't round correctly. However, you could lose marks if the accuracy of your answer is not enough, which is why they put the 3 significant figures, just to give you a sense of what's expected. Show substitution and working out clearly, because it is the process that we're marking. So it's really important to show your substitution and working out, because if you substitute a wrong number into a correct formula, you may have a chance of still getting 1 out of 2. Whereas if you've got an answer, we've got no idea where it comes from, and it's wrong, obviously, you're going to get 0. Watch the number of marks allocated. I remember a couple of years ago, there was a circle geometry question, and part of it was, of course, the reason. And some people wrote a page of a reason. Normally, the more you have to write, the more it indicates you don't know what you're talking about. So keep it really succinct. And do keep an eye on the marks. If something's worth more than 1 mark, well, it's probably going to need more than 1 line of working out. And also, particularly for Extension 2 students, you know, this Extension 1 should be reasonably straightforward. Well, nothing's ever completely straightforward in maths, but, you know, Question 2 should definitely be easier than Question 7. So if it's looking really difficult, stop and think maybe there's an easier way of looking at the solution. If you make a mistake, put a line through it. I would suggest from here on in, never, ever, ever use liquid paper, because if you liquid paper it out and then you've got to come back and write, you know, the answer where it needs to go, sometimes people forget, and it just takes too much time. If you've crossed something out and replaced it with something that's worthwhile and it's worth marks, we're never going to read what you crossed out. So just don't worry about it. 1 line, not such a scratching that it can't be read in case it was worth something. Just 1 line to indicate that's not what you want. And take care. As I always say to my students, like, the marks you lose because you forgot a formula that you should have known, that was a waste. You know, they're easy marks to get. The marks you lose because at the end of the question, you know, it's just really difficult on Question 7, or you've run out of time, that's another issue. But make sure you know the formula correctly, and make sure you slow down enough to write it down correctly and then correctly substitute what you need to. So watch your careless errors. I would go over your trials or other papers to just see what sort of marks did you lose that you really shouldn't have. You know, particularly if you lose marks in questions you knew how to do. Have a look at, did you read the question wrongly? You know, did you rush? Did you make some stupid numerical error? Have a look at that and learn from past experiences. Now, this is also very important. In some of the questions it said, show such and such. Don't fudge. We are very good at seeing what's a fudge and what's not. And if you get the correct answer, if it asks you to show something and you get the correct answer, but your working is incorrect, then you will not get full marks. So when you're rushing through, make sure that the squared sign or whatever other sign that is in the working that's necessary is there. If you do find that when you've gone through and worked something out, you got the answer that's different from the one in the paper, and then you realise where the mistake was, go back and fix it in every single line, because otherwise you won't get the full marks. And always check that your answer's reasonable. I know that sounds silly, but sometimes people come to a maths exam and they leave their common sense at the door. It's really important that when you get an answer, it makes sense within the context of that question. Because if it doesn't, then highly likely you've made some mistake that you can easily fix and get an extra mark. Link the parts of the question. And it's good to practice doing questions that have part 1, part 2, maybe part 3. Because quite often they're asking you, and particularly lately they ask a lot of show that questions, they're asking you to show something so that you can use it in the next part. If you can't show that, then go straight on and use it anyway. But make sure that if you're having trouble with one of the latter parts of a question, think back to, is there something from before that I could use that will make it easier? And remember the table of standard integrals. You absolutely don't need to learn these off by heart, but it does mean that differentiating cos, integrating sine, no excuse for getting the sign wrong. It's probably one of the most common reasons that people lose marks in maths papers is because of that annoying little negative sign. So make sure you take care. Diagrams. Circle geometry I find incredibly difficult to do without a diagram. So always copy or trace the diagram from the paper into your actual booklet. About a third of a page, half a page, use pencil, but it's so much easier for you writing, doing the exam and the people marking if you've got a decent diagram that you can work from and see what's going on. And use the notation in the question. So if in the question it's got a circle and it's got angles P, Q and R, use P, Q and R. If instead you like working with A, B and C, then that's fine as long as you have the diagram that you're working with, the notation that you're working with. If you find yourself scribbling on the actual exam paper, then you should have that diagram in the exam book, because you could give a beautiful circle geometry proof, but if you're using different notation to what's in the actual paper, and we're not sure of where that's coming from or how it links, then you're not going to get many marks for that at all. And write your working out clearly. If you are one of those students who sometimes can't read their own writing, and there are a few of them, I would suggest that between now and the HSC that you actually practice writing neatly, because it's really sad when you see a student who obviously knows how to do something, particularly binomial theorem or something like that, knows what's going on but can't determine themselves which was a K or then becomes an R or an X, or M's and N's and so on. So take care to make sure that you're writing things carefully. If we have trouble telling the difference between your 9s or your 4s, or then that's one of the usual ones, we will always look to make sure exactly how you write and therefore which one you're talking about. But it's so much easier if you just write neatly. Always, if the solution is in paper, make sure that what you get is what was expected. And if it's not, go back and fix it. And if it's not, and you don't think you've made a mistake, I would still suggest that if you've got to use that part for the next bit, use what was actually in the exam paper. And keep an eye on the time. It's really important that you get to the habit of being able to get through to question 7, which means that the easier stuff in questions 1 and 2, you really need to know well, so that you can get straight into it and have time at the end for question 7.